Hi everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of my playing with distress paints. So I went away and had a go at some different techniques that I'm going to share with you today. I feel a little bit more confident with them now than what I was in part 1. Just before we do, I just want to quickly show you how these bits of paper came out. These are just the bits where I smushed them around and left them to dry. And you can see how much texture and just really interesting patterns have come out of them. I love those dark spots on there. I love these dark spots. There's this one as well. I'm not going to do anything with these because they make great bases how they are. So I'm just going to leave them, and then if I ever want to use something quick, I've got something there prepared. So I went ahead and rewatched some of Tim Holtz's video where he demoed these paints, and I had another go at the paint resist technique. Now the way I did it, if you remember, I had the chevron stencil and I stenciled through it and then removed some of it away. Tim did it the opposite way around, so I almost did it backwards. He put a big layer of paint on, put the stencil down, and then took the paint away. So I have had a go at doing it that way. I had varying results. The first one I did was this. It didn't come out brilliantly. It was my own fault. I forgot to dry the paint underneath. You can see a little bit. I just used those circle stamps. So that was the first go. This was the second go. I did dry the paint, but again, didn't come out brilliantly. This was my third go, where you can see the circles a little bit more clearly. I used the small ones. And then I started to think, if these aren't coming out so clear, is it because the stencil needs to be a little bigger, excuse me, with not so much kind of tiny detail? So that's when I got to doing this. Now this one came out much better. This one is a resist with a resist on top. So I resisted with this chevron stencil, and then I popped another, and then I put some more paint over, put another stencil on, took that paint away so that we can still see some of the chevron coming through. That one was quite a successful one. I was pleased with that. This was another one I did. This time I just used a full stencil. This was okay. I felt like I could have removed, it's a little bit what I would call cloudy. It should have been a lot darker than this. I used the ground espresso, and I was using one of these sponges to remove it, and I think it just shifted the colour around. So it came out all right, you know. I could still do something with that. Not as clear and crisp as this. Then I did this one, and again, this is a resist on a resist. So first of all, I used the spotty stencil, and then I went back over and used a lined stencil. So that was those. I did get better with it with practice. This was another thing that I tried when I was trying the resist, and I thought, let's use something that's not quite as detailed. This is a stamp, and I stamped it with this old paper. While the paint was wet, I put embossing powder on, dried it off, and then used the spray stain in tea dye, and I used some of the paint as well. So the paint, I think it was the brushed corduroy, it's the lighter colour, and then I used the spray, and that's this colour here, the darker one. Again, it's quite grungy, but if you do that kind of grungy journal, I think that's nice. This was my kind of first successful resist. Again, I printed a stencil with the old paper, dried it all off, and then put the paint over the top. That's a nice subtle one, would make a lovely background. This, and again, this one was just a very simple one where I put one layer of paint, put a stencil on, lifted it back up to reveal the white paper underneath. So there's lots of different things that I was having a go at. Today I'm going to show you how I went about using a stamp to do the resist and using a stencil to do the resist. Again, I probably won't get it perfect, but I want to have a go and try and get better at these techniques, so I thought I may as well do it together with you. So bear with me, I need to go and get a few bits and bobs and then we'll make a start. So the first thing that I have learned is to be really organised and prepared with all the equipment that you need. So I have my water, actually it's mixed media paper, cut up in front of me. I have some glass palettes here for stamping and rolling. I've got an old cloth which is damp, which I've kept just kind of air drying in a plastic bowl. I've got a tea towel. All my utensils that I may need are here as well. I've got a brayer, my paints are here, and I'm just trying to keep it as organised as possible because it can get out of hand. I've also got a tub of warm soapy water next to me as well, then all the stencils can go straight into there. So the first thing I'm going to do is to show you how I did the resist with a stamp. So I did find that these wooden stamps are much better for me personally because I don't have a stamping block than these silicone type of stamps. So I'm going to show you with a wooden stamp. That fits on there. The detail isn't too tiny, so that should be okay as well. And what I'm going to do, I don't have a glass mat, so I'm using the largest palette that I have. I will use the grey. And the first thing is I'm just going to put a blob onto there. And I'm just going to use my brayer and pick up some of the paint onto my brayer. Then onto my stamp. This is the first time I've done this with this stamp. So again, it's trial and error. I'm not sure that any paint is actually picking up. I think this might be a little bit slippy. Hang on, I'm going to switch to a piece of paper. I didn't feel like any paint was picking up. Let's try this. That seems better. Now again, I don't have a stamping block, so before I pop this down, I like to make sure it's as covered as it can be because I only get one chance at this. I'm going to turn it over. I've made a bit of a mess there. And to put it down. And I'm just going to try and get even pressure all over the stamp. And we'll just see. This is quite an old stamp and I think it might be a second-hand one. So it was a bit crusty, so I'm not sure what the impression's going to be like. But again, let's just give it a go. I'm going to take that off. Okay, that's not too bad. And the next thing we need to do is dry this completely. It doesn't take very long at all for it to dry. So the next thing I'm going to do is spray some of this spray stain. Now, I do feel like I'm quite limited with my colours. So last night I did order some, a couple more spray stains and a couple more of the paints in like a blue, in blues. Because I've got my winter blues kit coming up, so I thought I could be a little bit more versatile with it. So this is the only colour for now that I'm going to use on here. So I don't know how well this colour, the pumice stone, is going to pick up against this because the contrast isn't massive, but we'll give it a go. So what I have been doing is putting something here to block the spray from going too far. This is dry. It's important to have it dried first because you don't want it soaking up any of the colour. Okay, going to dry that off a little bit. So you can see the dragonfly a little bit. Again, this is what I was finding with the colours that I have. I'm not getting a massive contrast. I don't think you will get as big a contrast as what you do using a stencil. And also as well, you kind of do need to use ink, not ink, it's like a stain, like a translucent material. Otherwise, if you kind of put the oxide over, then you're actually putting something quite opaque over an opaque paint and it won't show. So I'm just going over now, trying to remove any of the ink on top of the paint, and we have some success. This isn't my favourite thing to do because, as I say, I like to have that big contrast. What I might try doing now is actually stamping in the darkest colour and seeing if that makes a difference. Another reason why I think these wooden ones work well is because they're not as floppy. So when you're applying the paints, you tend to get quite a good covering. Let's get another piece of paper. Okay, so that's our impression. Let's dry that. Going to give this a spray. This one's working better. I think with the colours I've got, it's working best on a darker colour. I mean, it's still not great, and as I say, it's not my preferred thing to do. The stenciling one is. But yeah, I just thought I would go ahead and show you how I've been doing that. If you've got any tips or tricks to help me with that, let me know. I think I could maybe be applying a little bit more paint to the stencil. I may give it one more go with some more paint and just see how we get on. I'll do it on the back. So this time, trying to be a little bit more generous with the paint. What I was trying to avoid was having loads of, like a big splodge of paint and then it not being a crisp impression. But perhaps I've not been applying enough. So let's be a little bit more generous. Now that is much better. That now I think will come out really nice. So let's get that dry. It's really important again for it to be really dry. And I'm going to try this one more time, and I think with this impression we may have cracked it. Yeah, much better. So this is much better. I've had a lot more success with that. If we compare it to this one, two things which I think I did on this one which improved it was I used a darker colour and I went a lot heavier with the paint. So that impression really does come through. I'm going to try one more with a Christmas tree. Same colour, nice and dark, and see how that comes out. So it's this stamp here I'm going to be using. So again, I'm going in quite heavy, making sure I've got a good covering. Now what I could also do is I do actually have some foam which I use for stamping. So I should have really got that out. But not to worry. That's a really nice one. Right, so let's dry that one. I actually think this looks really nice on its own. If you just put Merry Christmas there, you've got a gorgeous Christmas card, haven't you? Quite reluctant to put any spray on it actually. So what I think I might do is put the spray at the sides and let it run into it so that we don't cover it too much. Let's try that. Bit of water. I forgot to fill my water. That was the one thing I was thinking to myself, was fill your water. I'm going to dry this off. Before it's completely dry, I'm just going to try that little trick. I don't know if it works with this. And then going to pick the colour up. But I don't know if it works with the ink, with the spray stain. I've never used it. The paint will obviously not move. Now it's dry. Oh, look at that. That's so cute. That would be gorgeous on in a lighter colour like a blue. I think I'm going to have to try and recreate this for my winter blues card. I'm going to put a bit more. And it's actually stopping the tea dye colour from looking too harsh. And what's good is because this paint now isn't doing anything, it's not reacting, it's not going to run. Some clean tissue. So that's the benefit of it, I suppose. You're able to do stuff like this with it. So if you were just using the inks or the oxides, they would still have some kind of reaction. They're going to run or change colour, whereas the paint doesn't. So that's a really good benefit of the paint, I would say, in my opinion. Love that. So let's now try with stenciling. I watched Tim Holtz, like I said, and found a few tips and tricks. So the first thing that Tim Holtz was saying, I sound stupid keep saying Tim Holtz, but also I think if I say Tim, it's like I'm calling him my mate. But obviously we're not mates. So Tim Holtz. Yeah, so what he was saying was, I'm going to go on just with a paintbrush for this, is for this to be successful, actually give the paint something to resist. So go in with nice layers, nice thick layers, which, to give it a chance of actually doing something. That's going to be our base layer. I'm going to dry it because I don't want it to mix with other colours. Onto that, I'm going to add in, that was the gathered twigs. I'll do the brush corduroy. So on these base layers, anything that you're going to want to see through the stencil, now's the time to do it. So let me clean that brush. So for example, if you wanted to do a pattern or make some texture, kind of do it at this stage. If you wanted to mix your colours or whatever, you can do that at this stage. I'm just kind of going to turn my brush this way. Again, this is going to be seen through a stencil, so you don't need to worry about it all being perfect. And you could even just marble this, like smudge it onto your mat. So this is going to be my base, okay? So I'm going to dry that. Make sure it's really, really dry now. So once that's all nice and dry, and it is really important that it's dry, because we don't want any of that base colour to come up, we can then choose a stencil. That might be a nice one. And what I'm going to do is choose a top layer, a colour for the top. I think I will go with the old paper. I'm going to stick with a paintbrush because I want it on quite thick so that it lifts up, well, in the hopes of it lifting up nice and crisply. And so I do put it on quite thick, and I do like to have a clean paintbrush because I want this to be a nice kind of crisper colour. I like to use a paintbrush as well to kind of flick it so that it's not like a big harsh line. Your stencil goes on, then you get your cloth and you remove anything in the gaps, and what it should do is take off that paint and leave what's underneath. So you need to keep moving your cloth so that you're not spreading the paint. And just be careful as you lift up as well that you don't move your stencil. If your cloth is too wet, you run the risk of it smudging underneath the stencil. That's happened to me as well. So try not to press, try not to have your cloth too wet, and also try not to press too hard so that you're not squeezing water out of your cloth. And just keep moving the direction of keep moving your cloth so that you're not just moving the colour. It looks a little bit like wood grain, doesn't it? So what should happen now, hopefully, depending on how well I've done it, is we should see the wiggly lines left in that grey, in that old paper. And we have. It's not the best. I do think I've got it a little bit wet, but it's definitely there. So then what we can do is dry that off. And now that that's dry, we can do anything over the top of it because the paint's not going to go anywhere. So we can even do another resist if we wanted to. This is where you can start kind of layering, adding things to it. I'm just going to print that off onto there. So let's maybe try this one. And what I think I'll do this time is use a different colour, put it here and come down like this. And I may use the ground espresso again. Paintbrush. And I'm going to bring it down here in the hopes that we might be able to see some of that squiggle underneath. We won't be able to see loads because this isn't a big surface, but we might see a bit. So that goes on. We're going to pick up the paint now from those gaps. And now you might not be able to tell straight away because the paint colour we're picking up is quite similar to the colour underneath, but I think it will give it a good kind of tonal, layered, tone on tone type colour, type effect, brown on brown. So that's my hope. Okay, and then we get this very subtle, can you see that? Very subtle tone on tone. Just a little bit of interest onto the page. I want to do the same, but I want to use the remainder of this colour and move the stencil a little bit to kind of give it like an offset. Sounds fancier than what it actually is. I'm going to bring it kind of down here. Just kind of doing that feathering effect. I'm going to move it to like here. And repeat the process. There we go. So now we have that. I'm liking this little feathering bit down here. And you can keep going. So this is the resist technique with a stencil, and I love it because I love to layer. And you can just keep going and going and going. You know, we could put something over here, but again, if you were now just to have that like that, there's loads that you could do with it. So now let's do just a really simple 2-colour resist. Let's put, again, I'm going to go dark because with being restricted on colours, it gives me a good colour contrast between. So, ground espresso on there. I'm going to make sure that's completely dry. I thought it would be fun to use something like this. And also, with it being like a big area, it might be easier to see the difference. So we could even just like put a stencil on like that, couldn't we? And just see what we come up with. So I think I'm going to use the brush corduroy as a top layer. And you can make this textured if you want. You can add some detail, you know, you can get a circle and do that type of thing. If that's what you fancy doing. What I'm going to do is just put that on there like that and see what we get. Get my cloth and wipe this away. Leaves are a little bit fiddly because of the sharp bits. Okay, let's see what we get. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? I like that. That, just on its own like that, would make a lovely, I think I might have rubbed a bit hard there. It seems to have rubbed all of the background off. But I think that would make a really lovely journal card. If you just cut that down, you can get a black marker and then just kind of very messily go around it. I like that. So here are just a few ways that the distress paints can be used that I have come across and seen and been practicing. I am sure there's loads of other ways. So let's just quickly go over what we did. So in part 1, we used embossing resist, that one, and then I did this one on my own. Then we did the stamping resist. So we stamped with the paint and then put the spray stain over the top. We splattered water onto that one. And then these are examples of the resist with stencils. So I'm really pleased with what I've been able to achieve, and I hope it's, you know, perhaps if you've never used them before, it's given you a little bit of inspiration as well. I will see you in the next video, and until then, take really good care of yourselves. See you soon. Bye.